کنفرانس در برلین. حفاظت بین المللی برای ساکنان شهراشرف. مشارکت آلمان در راه حل انساندوستانه. 28 ژانویه 2012 8 بهمن 1390.
Das Wort hat jetzt Lewis, der langjährige Direktor des FBI.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and my distinguished panel members, Professor Sussman, President Rajvi. Thank you very much for your inspiration and introduction and having the moral courage and the persistence to face immeasurable risks and odds and yet be prevailing as a leader of great moral character. So we thank you very much. To our friends in Camp Ashraf, we admire your courage. We salute you. We ask you to stand strong and to know that you have many friends and allies around the world who will do our very best to ensure your safety and ultimate liberty. There's a lot of things going on, and I predict that in the next several months, not years but several months, we're going to see enormous change in your homeland, many of you, and in all of the factors and ingredients that will go into that process. So we have two issues to talk about again tonight. We have the immediate issue of Camp Ashraf, and we will do everything in our power to ensure that that does not happen. The larger issue, of course, is the future in Iran. The factors that are moving to a head quickly now in the next few months will determine the ultimate change of regime, which I predict will happen very, very soon. The economic sanctions, the disastrous state of the currency, the March elections, which will renew the same opposition that many brave young men and women demonstrated several years ago, the race of the Iranian regime to come up with a nuclear capacity has caused immediate crisis focus, not just from the United States, but from other countries. There was an article today in the newspaper about the current discussions about what the options are to prevent this regime, this murderous regime, from attaining a nuclear capacity. Their friends next door, the Syrians, are on the ropes, both politically, economically. Many people predict that the days of the Assad regime are numbered. The compromise of that regime obviously will severely weaken both the strategic as well as the geographical power and presence of the regime in Tehran. So there are many things happening. There are many pressures. There are many factors that no one can exactly predict with respect to the outcome, except the ability to predict that Iran will soon be free and that regime will be gone forever into the dustbin of history. You know, the terrorist regime that runs that country and exports terrorism through the IRGC and through many other means, it's on the wrong side of history. Whether it's the Americans hunkered down in the winter of 1776 in Valley Forge, whether it was the Berliners here in the 1960s who were under siege, the tide of history is moving very powerfully in favor of liberty and favor of freedom. And so that will happen also, as it's been happening, not just in the Maghreb, but in many, many other countries. And the history of the world, because of the strong and dynamic nature of our human being, which wants to be free, which wants to have liberty, we're moving in that direction. Our goal today is to make sure that the people in Ashraf, who represent not just the Iranian resistance, but represent the spirit and forces of liberty, are protected, and that they are given the opportunity to live in freedom and run a democratic government as Mrs. Rajvi has proclaimed it would do. We, as Americans, are following the lead of many of our colleagues, not just in Germany, but in the EU and in the UK. We are very disappointed as Americans in the leadership of our current government, who has not done what they are morally and legally responsible to do, which is the guarantee of the protection of the 3,400 men and women in Camp Ashraf. We have been speaking, we have been writing, some of us were demonstrating outside the White House. We looked at each other, the former Secretary of Homeland Security, the former FBI Director, and we said, we're demonstrating outside the White House because we cannot get our government to implement and fulfill its promise to protect and rescue these 3,400 people who have a written guarantee by the United States of America. You're going to hear in a few moments from Colonel Martin, who was the representative of the United States who can talk about his friends, as he says so emphatically, in Camp Ashraf. And the fact that this is not a terrorist organization, it has never been a terrorist organization, and the listing by the United States, which we have complained about, spoken against, demonstrated against, written about, talked to anyone who we can speak to, is unjustified on the facts, on the law. It was an accommodation to the Iranian regime in 1997, so relations could be quote-unquote normalized in exchange for putting the MEK on the list. And we have witnesses who were in the political process inside the United States government who have confirmed this. In response for putting the MEK on the list, the regime offered normal relations and normal discourse. Well, of course, that didn't happen. You know, if you look at the list and its population over the years, it's very, very clear that the list does not have a basis in fact and law in every case, and that in many cases, but particularly in the case of the MEK, it is purely a political accommodation which is now 14 years too late and causing irreparable damage and death because, as you know better than anyone, both the regime in Tehran and the Iraqi government have used this listing as a license to kill members of the MEK. And they will continue to do that, and if we have another, God forbid, massacre, the Iraqis will be the first to proclaim that, well, the United States lists this organization as a terrorist group, so what are we expected to do? We wrote on January 20th, I think you can find it pretty easily now, another letter to our Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton. We wrote another letter to the Secretary General of the United Nations. It's not only a remarkable letter, but the signatories on this letter, there are 21 former American government officials and military officials, including a former Attorney General, former CIA Director, former National Security Advisor, former Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The list goes on and on and on. These people represent the foremost experts on counterterrorism in the world. They were the men and women who not only formulated the policy, but who deeply and intensely understand what terrorism is and what terrorism is not. Every one of us, all 21 of us, and we repeated this again to the Secretary of State and the Secretary General, have found beyond any possible doubt the MEK is not a terrorist organization and should be delisted immediately.